today, and we'll end on market definition. Now, I know that law students tend to panic when they see the word economics. I'll repeat, I think I've said this before. Economics is one of the easiest things you can ever learn. And so hopefully, the way I explained it won't make it too complicated. If you don't understand anything, stop me, okay? I try to minimize the use of graphs. In reality, you don't actually need graphs to show any of the economic principles, because graphs are just to make it more impressive. Yeah? Well, and the market definition, which the clever people amongst you will have noticed is quite an important part of this module. Why? Exactly, the essay is about market definition. So even if you don't care about the topic, you now have to care about the topic, yeah? All right. You know that you can send me a formative assessment essay. Do you have any idea what I'm talking about? All right. So in February, you have an essay due. But because I know some of you haven't really got much experience with writing essays, we do a practice run where you can send us a 2-page plan. Now, this is not for the same topic as the ultimate essay you have to hand in for marks, but it's a practice topic. It is online on the Moodle, and if you send it to me by November something, mid-November, I will give you feedback, and mostly the feedback will be about, yes, this is the right way to approach an essay, no, it's not, these are the things you should do better, and so on. It's just a practice run. Okay, let's start. So let's start with the basics. Do you actually need economics for competition law? The short answer is yes, otherwise we wouldn't be teaching it. The longer answer is it depends. It depends mostly where you practice, if you're going to be a lawyer. It also depends largely on how convincing your economic argument is. In America, most of the cases in competition are private cases, where not only does each side have lawyers, each side has economists. And this is a beautiful illustration of how unreliable a science economics is, because either side will have a different opinion on whether or not this conduct is bad or is good, depending on economic theory. And either side usually has valid economic theories to put forward. So some people argue we don't need economics because economics is flawed. We might as well just rely on law. But in reality, economics will be everywhere. And if you don't understand what the hell people are talking about, even if you were possibly to disagree with them, you wouldn't be able to counter them, because they will throw around beautiful words like marginal cost, and you'll be like, no idea what this guy is talking about, I look like a fool. Even if I might be more clever, or I might be right, I can't throw the same jargon at them, I can't throw the same fancy words at them, and therefore I'm not as convincing. Yeah? A lot of the things we will see throughout the lecture is going to refer back to things like marginal cost, or average avoidable cost, things like that. So it's good for you to know what they are. Okay? All right. Now, economics is the science of scarcity. Can anyone tell me what the word scarce means? If I say a product is scarce, what does that mean? Yes, there's not much of it. Good. Can you give me an example of a product that is scarce?
Depending on the season, bananas or like food from the sea.
Okay, yes, that's true. It's right, but it's not as obvious an example. Does anybody have like a really blatantly obvious example of something that is scarce?
Diamonds.
Can you say diamonds? Diamonds, yes, diamonds.
They're clearly different.
She clearly likes diamonds.
Yeah, I do too, but
diamonds, right? Diamonds are scarce, they're in limited supply. So something is scarce if there isn't much of it, but not just that, there isn't much of it and a lot of people want it. So you've got something that is in limited supply and there's people who want it. So as a result, not everyone's going to be able to get it. That's what we mean when we say something's scarce. Is oxygen scarce? You're pulling a face?
No.
No? It's a trick question. It is a trick question because... Yes? What do you need in order to have breathable air? Yes, plants, trees. We're running out of those eventually, aren't we? Yeah, so we're chopping down woods. Right? Not to scare the shit out of you, but eventually we won't have, at the rate we're going, enough trees to produce oxygen. In which case, oxygen actually is scarce. There is a limited supply of it and we might run out, and there might not be enough for everyone. Yeah? Pretty much everything that we need has a limit to it. Okay? It's not infinite, which means that one day we might all live in a bubble and buy oxygen. In which case the highest bidder will be able to live. And that is the science of economics. When we run out of oxygen, who gets it? Who is the one? Who are the people, the few, who get to breathe? Now, economics gives you an answer. How do we determine who gets to breathe? How do we determine who gets the product that is in limited supply? Now, the economics we're going to look at is market economics, free market economics mostly, but there's loads of other sciences, other versions of economics. Marxist economics, communist economics, they answer the same question. How do you allocate scarce products among everyone who wants it? But they answer it differently. They don't use the free market mechanism to allocate those scarce products. Okay? So scarcity is the economic problem, and economics tries to figure out how you allocate scarce products amongst people. And we, in Europe, in America, seem to have converged on the idea that the best way to do that is the market. Now, what is the market? Is it something physical? Can you touch the market? No. The market is the word we use for the interactions between sellers and buyers. Okay? It is a theoretical framework that says, these are all the sellers, these are all the buyers, how do they work together? How does demand, the buyers, work together with supply, the sellers? Let's start with demand. Just a point is that when we speak about demand in economics, we speak about everyone who buys, all customers, all buyers. Okay? You will see that this is an EU interpretation of consumer, because most economic theories by consumer mean the final customer, the person who buys something for their own satisfaction, not for commercial purposes. But when we talk in EU competition law about the consumer, we mean everyone who buys. Yeah? So this is a slight aside that sometimes it's confusing who the consumer is, but for the purpose of EU competition law, it's everyone who buys something. Okay? Alright. So the theory of demand. The theory of demand basically is the question, how much do people want to buy something? How much do you value diamonds? Yeah? How will you determine who gets diamonds? How do we know who gets diamonds? What do you need to get diamonds? What do you say, time? Right. If you're not the one in the production line, but you're the one who's trying to buy it, what do you need to get diamonds? Right, money. Money is the way we determine who gets what. This is an important thing to remember, because everything I tell you is about people who have money. People who do not have money do not fit in free market economics. Yeah? Economics isn't about justice, it's about efficiency. It's about determining who gets what without actually looking at what if you don't have any money at all. That's not what economics does. Yeah? Doesn't mean it's not valuable, obviously, to discuss, but it's not what we do here. So you need money to buy diamonds. Now what if there's 10 people who want to buy diamonds? How do we determine who gets the diamonds? Yes, who can pay the most? Let's say there's 5 diamonds and there's 10 people who want those diamonds. Well, those 5 people who can pay the highest price will get the diamonds. It's easy, right? Logical. Now we look at who pays the highest price, or who is able to pay the highest price, through what we call reservation price. Reservation price is the highest, the maximum price a particular individual is willing to pay. Okay? So, let's say we have this Kinder Bueno. Who here likes Kinder Bueno? Alright, your purple pink sweater. Do you like Kinder Bueno? How much are you willing to pay maximum to get it?
£1.
Don't like it very much, do you? Alright, £1 is your maximum price you're willing to pay. Reservation price. Remind me what your name is?
Alice.
Alice. Alice?
Yeah.
Alright, Alice's reservation price is £1. Anybody else willing to go higher to buy this Kinder Bueno?
£2.
£2, alright. Anybody else? Who offers more than £2 for the Kinder Bueno? I might actually sell it to you.
Well, if I'm starving, I'll pay
$2.50. Okay. So we've got a reservation price of $2.50, a reservation price of $2, and a reservation price of £1. Now, if there's only one Kinder Bueno and only one seller, me, I'm gonna give it £2.50, right? Because I want to make the most money possible. But there might be multiple Kinder Buenos. You might all be capable of buying it because there's loads of it to go around. You will all get the Kinder Bueno. But then the next question is, how well did you come out of that deal? And this is what we call how much consumer surplus did you get. Consumer surplus is the difference between your reservation price, the maximum you were willing to pay for it, and the price you actually paid. So, let's say I sell this Kinder Bueno for £2, right? And you said your maximum was $2.50, right? So it is your consumer surplus. Yes, the 50p you keep in your pocket, right?
Don't you have a monopoly right now?
I do have a monopoly right now, and I'll get to that. I am a horrible human being, and I'm exploiting your desire for Kinder Bueno. So I'm selling this at £2. You have consumer surplus of 50p. What would your consumer surplus be? You had a reservation price of 2,
Yeah.
right? And I'm selling it for 2. What is your consumer surplus?
No.
None. You don't win anything out of it except for the Kinder Bueno, right? You have paid the maximum you were willing to pay. And I will come to you. Alice, what is your consumer surplus?
Nothing.
Yes? Negative?
You have the surplus.
Yes? But what happens? If I sell this to you at 2 and your maximum price, your reservation price was 1,
I still buy it.
no, you don't. That's the point. That's the point. If you are maximum £1, there's no way you're buying this at £2. Do you understand that? Okay. See, it's simple. Okay, you understand economics. Okay. Now we've done this for all these individuals, right? Now, when we talk about demand, we basically put the reservation prices of all these different people together, yeah? And that becomes your curve, your demand curve. So me, these are all your teachers if you hadn't noticed. This is the price that I am selling at. Everybody who was willing to pay more has consumer surplus. Everything above the green is consumer surplus. Everybody's consumer surplus as individuals is put together on here, and this makes a demand curve. You're still with me? Do you have any questions so far? Your blank faces always worry me. Okay, so let's say I sell this at £1, and your reservation price was 2, and your reservation price was $2.50, right? So if I sell this at £1, how much would your consumer surplus be? Your reservation price was 2, right?
Yeah.
And you're buying it for £1. So what is your consumer surplus?
I buy 2.
You were like, maximum I'll pay £2, but I've gotten it for 1. So how much are you winning?
2.
£1, right? Does that make sense? So you're maximum willing to pay £2.
Yeah.
Thanks. But I'm selling it to you for £1.
Yeah.
So your consumer surplus, the difference between the price you were maximum willing to pay and the price you actually paid is £1. Do you see that? Yes? Okay. How much would your consumer surplus have been? 150. If you are the only two consumers in the market, we would put 2 bars on the graph. Your consumer surplus and your consumer surplus. 150 and 1. So the total consumer surplus in the market is 250. Yes? These are like basic calculations, but I know for lawyers this is a stretch already. I was like this, your blank faces, when I first heard this. But it's actually really simple. Now you're not alone in a market. Buyers aren't alone. There's only buyers, you can't buy anything. So, there are multiple things that you have to consider when you determine how high you are willing to go in your reservation price. First, how much you want this. Actually, economics is the science of desire. I always say there is no more feminine science, no more soft science than economics. It's basically about how you satisfy your deepest, darkest desires. If you're lonely, economics will help you. How can you satisfy the desire no longer to be lonely? What are the particular things you can buy? What can you buy no longer to be lonely? Shoes, yes? All right. Yes. Okay. Well, will that make you less lonely? I mean, you will look stunning, but...
Every girl's kind of like to shop, I think. Like
Every girl?
Okay, just me.
Just you. All right. But maybe you're not wrong. If you look hot as hell, right, you might not be lonely for long. You can buy a dog. Or you can go to the pub and have a beer and hope somebody chats you up. Or you can go on a dating service. Or you can buy a prostitute. Even things that are illegal count in economics. It's all part of the market. Yeah? So it's about satisfying your desires. If you're hungry, you buy food. If you're cold, you buy clothes. Okay? Now, how much are you willing to pay for those clothes? Or for that prostitute? Well, it will depend on other things you are able to buy to satisfy the same desire. Now, if you can pay for a dating service and you're pretty sure that some girl will notice you on there, you might not be as tempted to pay a lot for a prostitute. Right? So, how much your reservation price is for a particular service depends on all your other options. It also depends on how much money you have. If you only have £5 in your pocket, I'm sorry, no matter how much you want those services, you ain't gonna get it. Yeah? Now, it also is determined by the other desires you have. So, okay, you're lonely and you want to pay for a dating service. But you only have, what, £100, and you also need to keep money to buy food because you're hungry and clothes because you're cold. Okay? So no transaction happens alone, in isolation. It depends on other things you also need to buy. Yeah, that makes sense? It also depends on whether there are actually people selling things to you. And this is where the prostitute example actually becomes relevant, because if you are somewhere where it is outlawed and you don't know that there's a dark alley where these services are still being supplied, you won't be able to get it no matter how much you want it. Yeah? So you need sellers. You need people who also want to sell those Kinder Buenos, let's go back to less controversial examples, to you. Okay, now as buyers, consumers has reservation prices, so do sellers. What is the reservation price of a seller? How will that be determined?
By the cost of production.
Yes, that's true, that's very good. That's one of the things that go into calculating the reservation price. But more broadly, what is a reservation price? For buyers, it's the willingness, their maximum willingness to pay. The price maximum they're willing to pay. So what is for a seller?
Minimum price sellers is willing to accept.
Very good. The minimum they want to sell at. The minimum price they're willing to accept to sell you the product, right? So whereas a buyer has a maximum they're willing to sell for, a seller has a minimum. Yeah? Does that make sense? Because the higher the better for sellers, but not for buyers. The lower the better for buyers, the higher the better for sellers. So the reservation price of a seller is the minimum price they're willing to accept to sell this product. And you're absolutely right, the cost of production is one of the factors that goes into calculating that reservation price. So if we go back to the Kinder Bueno, you will see that actually the market is about a love story. It's about finding a buyer and a seller that match with each other, right? So you need to find, for every buyer, a seller whose reservation price matches with the buyer's reservation price, okay? So we'll go back to this Kinder Bueno, and remind me of your name.
Nika?
Nika, you're the buyer. How much is the maximum you're willing to pay for this?
40p?
You're making my life so hard. 40p. Jesus. Okay. 40p it is. Because really clearly doesn't like Kinder Bueno that much. Anybody else? 80p. What is this?
Yeah, if you go to Lidl, you have a packet of 4.
I am the monopolist. There's no one else in the world selling this beautiful Kinder
I have the
Bueno.
memory of going to Lidl, and that makes sense.
Whatever. Okay, you're just doing this to make my example difficult. But okay, let's go with your 40p and your 80p. I am selling this. The minimum I want to get for it is 60p. Will you and I make a match?
No.
No, because our reservation prices do not match. Will you and I make a match? Yes. Why will we make a match? It's good for you. Exactly. It's cheaper than your reservation price, which is a maximum for buyers, and it's higher than mine, and I'm a seller. Mine is a minimum. Does that make sense? Now, her example is actually pretty good, in the sense that the way the market works isn't that there's only 2 people. There's hundreds of people. There's thousands of people. Yeah? And everybody looks at each other and says, hey, how much are you paying for this product? And you start outbidding each other. You clearly don't like it very much. But we've had reservation prices before that said £1 for the Kinder Bueno. So you're going to be out of luck, right? Because they're willing to pay more. Do you understand? That's how the market works. You keep going until you find someone who matches your reservation price. And whereas for buyers, it's determined by how hungry they are, or how lonely, or just how goddamn miserable. With sellers, it's about making a profit, or at least covering their costs, okay? But they will still be restrained in setting their prices. Why will they be restrained? Why can't they just set the highest possible price? Forget about regulations. We're talking about a total free market, a market without laws.
There is competition.
There's competition, so what does that mean?
There are other companies which offer the same product for the lower price with the same quality.
Yes, and so why does that matter?
Because I will try to find the cheapest and most affordable one.
Exactly. Now, I as a seller can't just put my reservation price through the roof, because there's another seller out there on the corner. And if I ask £5 for this Kinder Bueno, no one's going to buy from me. They're all going to buy from the other seller. So competition plays a role in determining sellers' reservation price. How high they will go before they accept to sell their product to you. And the idea of free market economics is that because there's so many sellers and so many buyers, everyone will eventually be able to find someone who matches with them. There will be, for every seller and every buyer, there will be someone they match with, right? Now my reservation price is 10 and so is yours, so we're a match made in heaven. This is the idea. The idea is that because there are so many sellers and so many buyers, eventually you will have to choose the one who matches with you. Yes? Do you understand that? Think about it like this. If I had continued to try and find someone to sell this to, I would eventually have gotten the price I wanted. Right? Because you would all have been trying to outbid each other to get this Kinder Bueno, this beautiful, beautiful Kinder Bueno. But then you could have called in loads of other people with Kinder Bueno. And I would have to be offering you a better price to sell this to you. The idea is that this continues until we all agree on what the easiest price is, the price that everybody is willing to pay. Does this happen in real life? Who said no?
Maybe.
Yes, why not?
Well, because sometimes because of market barriers, there's not a lot of options,
Mm-hmm. Yes.
and like the consumer who couldn't afford just can't buy the product and probably is gonna.
Exactly. This assumes that for every buyer, there is a seller that has the same reservation price, which means that there is an endless amount of people on the market. That there are no limits. If you don't like the price you see, you can move on because eventually you will find someone whose price matches with yours. That never happens in real life. And I'll come back to that. It's an ideal. So this is a good start, is it? All the things we're talking about don't actually happen. Beautiful. I will skip this for you. What I just told you with our love story is this on a graph. And you look panicked. Don't worry, I'll skip it. Alright, so we said that a seller's reservation price is determined by the costs they pay. And now is something you have to definitely remember. I'm going to give you a few cost concepts. And these concepts matter. They matter because a lot of the calculations people need to do to determine whether something is legal or illegal. Economics is getting too much for you, isn't it?
Yeah, of course it is.
Yeah. To determine whether or not something is illegal or legal, sometimes we use calculations with these costs in them. For example, for predatory pricing, which is something you will see, we say that if a price is below a particular type of cost, it is illegal. So what are the different kind of cost concepts? Well, we'll start with the basics. You've got fixed costs and you've got variable costs. The fixed costs are those costs that in production, they do not change no matter how much you make. So let's say that I am a baker and I bake cakes. And I am a lousy baker, I'm British, and so I use a machine to do it, right? So my machine makes cakes. I've paid £1,000 for that machine. Is the cost of the machine a fixed cost or a variable cost? Yes, it's fixed because no matter how many cakes I bake, the price that I paid for the machine remains the same. But then you've got the eggs, right? Every cake requires eggs. I mean, let's not talk about vegan cakes, but normal cakes require eggs. I don't actually know how many eggs go in a cake. Anybody here bake? 4? I'm guessing from the reactions. Let's say 4. 4 eggs in a cake. Okay. So, does that price, the cost of my eggs, does it change with how many cakes I bake? Does it change? Does that cost? Every Monday when I buy my eggs, does how much money I'm going to pay change depending on how many cakes I plan to bake?
Yes.
Yes, right? If I have 2 cakes, I'm going to need 8 eggs. If I have 10 cakes, I'm going to need 40 eggs, which means I need to pay more money. Still with me, right? So far, the logic is still there. Eggs, more eggs needed if more cake. Yes, more cake, more eggs. Therefore, you need to pay more if you make more cakes. Okay. All right. Now, is it really true that our machine for making the cakes, that is a price I pay just once? The £1,000 that I've paid for the machine, we said that's a fixed cost, right? And it doesn't change. We won't have to pay it again no matter how many cakes we bake. Is that completely true? Why not? You're shaking your head at me with your green top.
Maybe if you bake so many cakes that you need 2 machines, or you have to buy one more and you need to pay 2.
Right. There is a limit to every machine, right? A machine might break because you're using it too much, or it might need servicing, or you just can't put as many cakes in one machine. So if you want to make more cakes, you buy 2 machines. The idea of fixed costs isn't that you will never have to pay the price again. The idea is that in the short term, you only have to pay that price once, right? So machines are fixed costs and eggs are variable costs. So now I have a trick question for you. Employees, labor, fixed or variable? If you have a company and you hire people,
Depends
on what?
on the contract.
Yes, go on, explain.
If it's fixed, they must either put it like they might have a salary,
Mm-hmm.
and it's variable, so it might be like they might get paid by the hour, it might depend on the hours they work.
Very good, right? Salaries that are paid on a monthly basis, no matter how many hours you're asked to work in that month, fixed. But if your salary depends on how many hours you do, it's variable. Which means that calculations, when you take into account labor costs, you will have to check, well, what kind of contract do these employees actually have? A good example is fruit pickers, the thing that we're running out of because of Brexit. Don't know how many of you read the news, but like at least once a month we now have those newspaper articles in The Guardian that say fruit rotting in the fields because Europeans no longer come to the UK. Now, before they started saying fuck Britain, they used to come here and pick apples and they were paid per apple they picked. Is that a variable or a fixed cost? They're paid per apple. Variable, right? Because if you've got some genius fruit picker who picks 50,000 apples, that's going to be an expensive person to pay. Yeah? Does that make sense? Kind of? Yes? Okay. Now, when we talk about variable cost, we will not talk about one particular variable cost. We'll talk about average variable costs. Basically, we'll take all the variable costs that a company incurs and we'll take the average of it. So let's say that you've got, you paid £20 for your eggs and you paid £10 for your employees. Seems like a bad bargain, but anyway. Because they're paid per hour. And you paid £10 for the flour. Let's say this is all the variable costs you incur. That's £40 in variable costs. You have made 10 cakes. What is your average variable cost per cake? Think back to when you were in school, you were very young, and they asked you to do really simple mathematics. 4, very good. 40 is your variable cost in total, and you have 10 cakes, which means that there's 4 average variable costs. And please tell me this is mathematics you can deal with.
Yeah.
Good. Okay. What is the difference between average variable cost and average total cost? Why is the average total cost higher than the average variable cost on my graph?
You need to add the fixed costs.
Very good. You take your variable costs and you add fixed costs. Let's say our machine costs £20, right? Those are your variable costs and those are your fixed costs. So how much would your average total cost be per cake? We still have 10 cakes.
6.
Very good. We can do this. Very good. So average total costs is your average variable costs and your average fixed costs together. Okay? Now if you genuinely, if you don't understand these, come and ask me later if you're feeling embarrassed, don't want to talk about it or whatever, because these are cost concepts you will need. Okay? Right. Moving on to marginal cost. What is marginal cost? Almost there. We're almost at the end of costs. What's marginal cost? Yes?
I think it's the cost per individual unit that's being used.
Yes. Marginal means extra, right? So when we talk about marginal cost, we talk about the cost of baking an extra cake. Yeah? So say we're baking 10 cakes. Well, the cost of making one extra cake, of going from 10 to 11 cakes, is marginal cost. These can be things like, oh, I had, 4 eggs per cake. I needed 40 eggs when I was baking 10 cakes. But now I need 4 eggs more. Those 4 eggs more, how much extra do I have to pay in order to make that extra cake? Those 4 eggs more, that little bit extra flour, or a lot of extra flour. I'm not a baker. Yeah? Does that make sense? Cool. Alright. So, average variable cost, average total cost, and marginal cost. The 3 things you have to remember. Now, there's something that is interesting, and my research area is the digital economy. Most of the cost concepts we use currently are based on a more traditional idea of industry, where every time you make an extra product, you incur extra costs. But in the digital economy, for many tech sectors, actually marginal cost is almost zero. Meaning they spend a lot of money in the beginning. So for example, when Google creates its search algorithm and its database, it spends a lot of money on creating that, on that technology. But then every extra search result it produces hardly costs it, right? The marginal costs of an extra search result are very low, they're near zero. Which means that a lot of the cost concepts we discuss here don't actually work when we look at big technology giants. So basically I'm teaching you something for the 20th century. I'm sorry. The thing with competitional economics is that it doesn't seem to move on very fast. So maybe in 50 years we'll have figured out how to do this. Okay. Then, if marginal cost is the cost of producing an extra unit, what would marginal revenue be? First of all, what is revenue?
Gains.
Gains, yes. What you gain from selling. If you sell 10 cakes at £2, that's £20 in revenue. Yes, 10 times 2. Okay. So what would marginal revenue be? If marginal cost is the cost of producing an extra unit, what is marginal revenue? Very good. The increase in revenue from selling an extra unit. If you go from 10 cakes, selling 10 cakes to selling 11 cakes, how much extra revenue, how much extra income do you get? Right? Okay. Why do we need to know revenue and cost? Why do you need to know how much revenue and how many costs a company has?
The company should be profitable.
Yes, to determine profits. So your income, your revenue minus your costs is your profit. Yeah? Okay, so if I sell 10 cakes and I have £40 in revenue, but my costs are £20 or £30. I have £40 in revenue and my costs are £30. My profits are £10. This seems simple, but it's actually not entirely true. Because there are different ways of talking about profit. You have normal profit, also called zero economic profit, which is what we care about in competition law. What is zero economic profit? What is normal profit? Can you repeat? I heard someone whisper.
Money.
Yes? But why? What is different about me just talking about profit in general and me talking about economic profit? What kind of costs are included in normal profit? So what do you think when I say, oh, the costs of production? Name something. What can be a cost of production?
The labour.
Yes, the labor. Anything else?
Raw material.
Yeah, raw material. Electricity. Anything else? Transport, right? Anything else?
Taxes.
Taxes, true. Anything else? You're missing something really, really vital.
Time.
Time. We're getting there. We're getting there. What are you missing? What is the most important cost that you are missing?
Opportunity.
Very good. Opportunity cost. The cost of doing what you're doing and not doing something else. I'm standing here teaching you because I am paid a decent wage to do something I love. right? But hell, I could have done something else. I could be a lawyer and make a lot of money. So I'm actually not making a profit because I am getting less money from what I am doing now than from what I could reasonably have been doing with my time. We only talk about profit in this economic sense when you are not losing out. So we cover your opportunity costs. So we say that a company makes a normal profit, yeah, when its opportunity costs are covered. When actually this is the thing that would indeed have made them the most money in doing it. If you are a lousy baker and you are selling cakes, you, no matter how much revenue you make, are unlikely to be able to make normal profits because you could have made more money doing something else. Does that make sense? Why would opportunity cost be included in our calculation of profit? Why would this be included? Why would we cover opportunity cost? Yes?
It would be like your availability to sell, like you have the opportunity to actually sell
Mm-hmm.
your product.
Yes. Can you expand on that?
For example, like really simple, like there's loads of people in the market selling. If you're not the best seller of that product, you have less opportunity. You have more opportunity if you're reducing your.
Yes. Okay, I think we're getting there. Does anybody want to help? Yes.
You'll find no investors.
Yes. But I mean, it's not really about the investors, it's about you. Why does your opportunity cost need to be covered in this model? Why, in the free market, do we not just talk about the cost of production, as in eggs or labor or flour, but why do we also include the opportunity cost? The fact that you could actually have made more money doing something else.
Maybe to encourage people to enter the market.
Very good. To encourage people to become sellers. Only dumb people, or people like me who seem to love this, would do something that actually doesn't make them as much money as doing something else. So, let's say that we only, in the free market, only stimulated a market in which your cost of production are covered, then nobody would start selling. Only idiots would start selling. But if we say, hey, we make sure that your profits include the money you would have gotten from doing something else, then this is the best deal, isn't it? Because you're not going to make any more money doing something else. So this is an important thing to remember. Whenever we talk about trying to get a perfect market, perfect competition in which profit is zero, profit isn't technically zero. We're talking about people are still getting money, more money than they would have gotten doing something else. Yes? We say that profits are high, profits are super normal, if you're not only getting more money than you would have gotten doing something else, but you're even going higher than that. Are you with me? Do you understand this? Let's say that I could have made £500 an hour. Yes, £500 an hour for being a consultant. And I don't actually know what I make an hour now. Last year I made £8 an hour. Let's make that easy. £10 an hour doing this. Yes? What should I at least be getting to make up for that? I'm clearly losing out in that system. Right? Because as a consultant I made £500 and then I go teach at £10. In order to stimulate me to stay in the job, I would need to get at least £500. Because that's what I would have gotten doing in another job. That would be the minimum I need to earn. Does that make sense? Anything I get above that, if I get £600 to teach, now I'm making a super normal profit. But if I only make £500, I am making zero economic profit. I am making normal profit. Yes? If you don't understand this, please, please tell me. Okay. What time is it? All right. We'll go back to easy things, or easier things. So, all of this is assuming that all the companies in a market are small, there's loads of them. But what is the problem with having loads of small companies? What's the problem with having loads of small companies?
They're not efficient enough.
They're often not very efficient. They will have higher costs than big companies. Why will a small company have higher costs than big companies? Because big companies profit from what we call economies of scale and economies of scope. What's an economy of scale? An economy of scale is when your product costs go down because you make more of the same product. Let's take our cake machine. Yeah? If I have paid £1,000 for that machine, but I only make 100 cakes, I am incurring £10 per cake in costs, right? I paid £1,000 for this machine, but I only make 100 cakes. Which means that just because of the price I paid for the machine, every cake is going to cost me at least £10 to make. That's expensive for a bloody cake. But hey, I'm a small business, and that is really all I can do. Because people don't buy more than 100 cakes. But let's take the same machine, the same £1,000, but you've got a massive company, or at least a bigger company, and that bigger company can sell 1,000 cakes. So how much is the cost of production per cake now? You have paid £1,000 for your machine, right? Yes, and you're making 1,000 cakes, which means £1. Because you are using the same resources, the machine, to make more of the same product, your costs are going down. Yeah? So here, the strawberries are all the same product. If you have a strawberry picking machine, I don't know if I'm making this up now, but a strawberry picking machine, the more strawberries you pick, the lower your costs are. Yes? So that's the benefit of a big company, is the costs go down. And why is that a benefit for us as consumers? Yes, hopefully the company will put its prices down because its costs are lower. So then you've got economies of scope. And economies of scope is the same principle, except that it's not to make the same product, but to make different products. Yeah? Let's say that your cake machine can also be used to make bread. Yeah? So instead of making more cake, you decide to also start selling bread. And you take over the cake and the bread shop. Yeah? And you're really ruling the village with your cake shop and your bread shop. And you need to buy no extra machines. You don't need to incur any extra costs because the same machine makes both the cake and the bread. Pretty sure it's going to be nasty, but let's roll with that. Let's assume that actually you need the same machine to make cakes and bread. Does this make sense? Economies of scale, your costs go down because you make more of the same product. Economies of scope, your costs go down because you can make different products with the same resources, the same machine. So, this brings us to the question of, so is it really better to have small companies rather than big companies? Because I just told you that big companies might actually be more efficient and lower the cost of production. So why do we care so much about fighting big companies? Obviously, the premise of competition law is that competition with loads of small companies is good, and a monopoly with one big company is bad. But why? Okay. So, we already talked about consumer surplus. Who can remind me what that was? We talked about it in the beginning. What's consumer surplus? Pink coat. What's consumer surplus? In your own words.
The consumer surplus is the price you didn't pay for it. Also, you would pay for it if you want to get it.
No, very good. It's the difference between the reservation price, right? The maximum you were willing to pay for a product and the price you actually paid. Remember our Kinder Bueno story. Yeah? Very good. So what would then be producer surplus or seller surplus? with the bubbles on your sweater. What's producer surplus? Don't look, say it in your own words.
Yeah, it has to do with the economies of scale, but it means that the more you produce.
Forget about what you just saw. Think about what was the first thing we talked about when we're talking about Kinder Bueno.
Yeah, it means that the minimum the producer is willing to estimate the price of the product.
Yes.
Yeah. And that actually matches with
So you're almost there. It's a difference between what a seller is minimum willing to accept to sell the product and what?
And actually, this price matches with the price a consumer is willing to pay, but the consumer pays a little more, so that's the surplus in the...
Yes, exactly. So you have the producers selling at a minimum price, the minimum they're willing to accept. Everything they get more than that is their surplus. That's everything they're gaining. If they were willing to accept a Kinder Bueno at £1, if they get £1.50, they have £50 producer surplus. Okay. This is where these things matter. Because the assumption is going to be that in perfect competition, consumer surplus will be at its highest. Okay? This is the assumption. And that we care about that. That consumers will benefit more than in a monopoly. Now, ACL people should know this. In America, this is often called consumer welfare. Consumer surplus and consumer welfare is often given the same name. That's confusing. I try not to talk about consumer welfare when we're just talking about the difference between the price they are willing to pay and the price they actually pay. Call that consumer surplus, if anything, not to confuse yourself. But you might read articles in which they call it consumer welfare. So, total welfare or total surplus would be what? Producer surplus and consumer surplus put together. Is that possible? Is it possible to try to maximize total surplus in a way that you don't make either consumers or producers worse off? If consumer surplus goes up, Alice?
Yeah, maybe if the reservation price was £50 and the consumer's one was 100 and the net was 75, so they can make the same.
In the middle, yes, and that's the assumption of perfect competition. So the assumption, you're right, the assumption is that you can find a point where everyone will have just as much surplus, everyone will be just as happy as each other. But does this really make sense in real life?
No.
Why not? I heard, yeah?
Because you would need perfect information, but you would need to know how much each surplus is.
You're right, but more basic than that. Why is it not possible to increase consumer surplus and at the same time also increase producer surplus? Come on, guys.
Because we have opposite interests, consumers and producers.
Yes, your interests clash. Producers want as high a price as possible. In order to have high producer surplus, the price needs to be high, right? But in order to have high consumer surplus, the price needs to be low, right? You don't win as a consumer if the price is super high, but you win as a producer if the price is super high. So it's very difficult to try to increase total surplus without making one of them worse off. Does that make sense? So Donald made a good point, which is that there is a system, an ideal in which we think that it is possible to find a point in which consumer surplus and producer surplus will be the same. They will both win the most. But that is a system that doesn't exist. We call it perfect competition, in which everybody knows the price of everyone. And there's endless sellers and endless buyers. And if you don't like the price that this one seller is offering, you keep moving on. But does that exist? Can anyone give me an example where you can see everybody's prices and know everybody's intentions, and there's infinite number of buyers and infinite number of sellers, and if one seller drops out of the market, he's immediately replaced by another seller. These are all the things you need for this to work. Can you give me a real-life example? Really? eBay? Is there endless amount of sellers on eBay?
You always find someone, and it's constant, like price is constant. So
Okay.
if you find more product, if you find a product you like, obviously you're bidding for it, but then if it goes too high, you find another product.
Okay. Give me an example of a product that you would buy on eBay. A bike, okay. So let's say you find a bike. It's pretty, it's red, it looks nice, but the price is too high. Can you find the same exact bike on eBay by another seller?
Probably can.
Okay. And if you don't like that price, can you move on and find the same exact bike?
Probably.
Very much doubt it. I use eBay every week. That's not how eBay works. eBay doesn't have a limitless supply of the exact same product, right? eBay has different private people selling bikes, and they might look a little the same. Like yesterday we were trying to buy a vintage Jag, and you had one that had scrapes on the side, and the other one was in impeccable condition, but we had to drive to Wales to get it. They're not the same product. No product is identical on eBay. Does that make sense? So the idea of perfect competition is that the same exact product with all the same exact conditions, there's a unending supply of sellers selling it. Can you think of another example in the real world?
Stock market?
Stock markets, okay. So why are you wrong? Tell me.
Because you actually have a limited number of shares.
Yes, exactly.
But you could offer new ones.
You could offer new ones, but then you dilute your company.
Yeah.
So it's still not the same value per share.
But if you have rising stock prices, you have different reservation prices.
That's true. Yes,
So
but you will still dilute it. But you're not wrong in the sense that they were designed to be as close to perfect competition as we could get. Yes?
Software.
Hmm, why?
Why? Because you can make unlimited copies as a producer of the same application or software.
Okay, that's true. So from the producer side, that could be perfect competition. Why is it not perfect competition from the consumer side?
Because the producer can still put up a high price for it and the consumer's not willing to pay it.
Yes.
And you can't move to another producer.
Exactly. All right. There is one example I could think of that came close to perfect competition. Street food, yes. Why street food? It's still not perfect competition. Why does it come closer? What are we talking about? The Germans won't know what the hell I'm talking about. I'm talking about proper street food, not our gimmick European continental ripoffs. Yes?
Well, at first, as for street foods, you have a lot of substitute.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't want to choose this one, you can choose another one. They have
Yes.
similar functions.
Yes?
And number two, there are a lot of people here every day.
Yes? Street food?
It seems like this is a perfect competition.
Yes.
Well, sorry, what's the difference between that and the bike? Because if I get a burger in one place, it's not gonna be the exact
See,
same burger. in
I'm
the
talking about Asian countries' version of street food, where you have street upon street upon street upon street upon street, where on every meter there is someone making food, and they're all very similar dishes, right?
It's not the same.
But why are they exactly? Why is it not perfect competition? So I remember being in Vietnam and thinking, "Ooh, this guy's hands are dirty, so dirty. Let's move on to the next one." The products aren't the same, even though there were endless streets and endless rows of the same dish. It was still not the same to me because the person cooking it looked different, right? One looks more hygienic than the other. Do you understand that? There is no such thing as perfect competition because there will always be something that sets one product apart from the other.
But how about gold?
Gold? Why gold? No, tell me why you think gold might be perfect competition.
Because there is no many competitors.
Yes, but perfect competition exactly is that there's loads of competitors. There's limitless competitors. And there aren't limitless sellers of gold, right? Okay. I'll do Monopoly, and then we can take a break. So, Monopoly. Monopoly is when you have one company. One company selling one product, and there's no other company, no other seller selling that product. Okay? Now, what is the danger of monopoly? Why do we not like monopoly? Because I told you before, a big company might have economies of scale, right? So their costs might be lower. Yeah, tell me?
But they won't give that to the consumer
Why not? Why wouldn't a monopolist give it to the consumer?
because then they make more money.
Yes? And why would they not be forced? What would happen in perfect competition that doesn't happen in monopoly?
As a consumer, you can move to another seller, but you can't do that in monopoly.
Exactly. So that's the idea. The problem with monopoly is that even though the companies might have lower costs, you can't guarantee that they will reduce their price because they have no incentive to do it. Because let's take, I don't know, diamonds, and let's say that, well, actually in practice the world only has one large diamond company, Diamond De Beers. Now, De Beers sells pretty much all diamonds, right, in the world. If you don't like the price this company sets, is there another company you can go to for diamonds at a lower price?
Black market.
The black market? Yes, you're right, you're not wrong. But are you really going to have that many rivals?
No.
No. And the thing with buying black market diamonds is you won't be able to resell it any legitimate way at any point. But you are not wrong. You're not wrong. So that's the problem, right? Let's say that someone charges £500 for, let's stick with bread, for bread. But they're the only bread maker in the world. Even if you wanted to buy bread at a slightly lower price, you would have no opportunity because nobody else is selling bread. Which means that this horrible human being who's selling bread at £500 can keep the price up at that level. That's what happens in monopoly. Why does that not happen in perfect competition? Let's say that it was perfect competition and you had one idiot company charging £500 for bread. Well, there's 500 other companies. I'll be like, you're ridiculous. I'm going down the street and buying from your rival. Which means that the £500 bread company won't have any customers, will be sitting lonely in the corner, crying their eyes out, going, everything is rotting or going stale and no one's buying my bread. What am I supposed to do now? Well, what are you supposed to do in that situation? What? Lower the price. Yeah, if your price is too high and everybody's fucking off to your rival, lower your price. But that won't necessarily happen in monopoly because there are no rivals that your customers can go to. Yes?
Monopolies are good in a way.
Why?
So for like, if you look at Amazon are like 30% of like online sales. They have like they probably have one of the biggest shares of any other company.
Mhm.
They're growing every day, making like billions
Mhm.
every week. So that, but the prices are good. And they're setting good prices. So it's like if they eventually they probably will take over like people like eBay, those are things okay.
But what? They're not a monopoly now.
No,
So what is the risk? But you're right, but let's take this further. What is the risk? Because what they're doing now, the low prices, is because they still have competition. The logic of monopoly is that one day they will no longer have competition. They will actually be a monopoly, which they are not now. And then, because they've gotten rid of all the competitions, they can charge any price they want.
But can they though? Because there's enough regulations to stop that.
Well,
Stop you charging prices.
not yet, but that's the point, isn't it? That's what people are trying to do, regulate them.
But equally, if they raise the prices like higher, they have a monopoly now. Say right now they have a monopoly.
Mhm.
If the prices are too high, people won't be able to afford it. So, but even if there are
Yes.
people that can buy it, so super rich people, say £500 bread, they pay it.
Yeah,
But if people
economics
don't pay
doesn't
it-
care about the people who don't have money,
I know,
remember?
but eventually you'll have you won't have enough people that will be able to afford it, so then you'll have
That's true. But before you reach that point, you will stop at where you only have the maybe 10% of the richest people in the world. I mean, that's great for Amazon, it's still not great for us, right? Yes?
Yeah, but you will have new market entrants.
That's the idea. And we will come to that. The idea is that monopoly, perfect monopoly, only exists because no other companies can enter the market. But that's not true in real life, yes?
Monopolies can be good in that way because it gives you the incentive to innovate, to stay in that
Yes. So this was a question I was going to ask. What is the one thing that perfect competition doesn't do? Perfect competition lowers prices, and it makes sure that everyone who has money can buy something, right? Because there's so many sellers, you will eventually find someone who offers the price you are willing to pay. But it doesn't allow for innovation. It doesn't allow for innovation because sellers won't be able to make profits that are higher than their opportunity costs, which means they won't have any money left over to invest in innovation. So in a world with a lot of innovation, the idea is you need monopolies because monopolies will help you make money that you then invest in innovation. There are counter-arguments to that, and we will look at that in other classes. But that's the idea, is that because in perfect competition, no one will have the money to invest. And it assumes that no one just cares about innovating for the sake of being clever and impressive. Yeah? Okay? All right. Okay, let's give you a 5-minute break. And in that time, try to think of an example of a real-life monopoly. I'll see you back here at 17 past. A real-life monopoly. What? Did you put your hand?